The last satellite feed died at 11:47 in the morning, right in the middle of a weather forecast. The woman reading the news paused, touched her earpiece, and then the screen went black. Across the world, every screen went black at the same time. That was how the Dravani Collective introduced themselves to the human race. Not with a message, not with a warning, but with silence. Nadia Ose was stitching a wound on a soldier's arm when the sky above southern France turned the color of a bruise. She looked up through the blown-out window of a field hospital and saw the ships. They did not look like anything from a movie. They were smooth, dark, organic shapes, like stones pulled from a riverbed, and they moved without sound. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They filled the sky from horizon to horizon, and they blocked out the sun as casually as a hand covering a candle. The war, if it could be called that, lasted 6 hours. Every missile fired at the Dravani ships simply stopped in the air, hung there for a moment, and then fell to the ground like a dead bird. Fighter jets lost power the moment they came within range. Tanks fired shells that bounced off Dravani armor like rubber balls thrown at a wall. The combined military strength of the entire planet did absolutely nothing but by evening. The Dravani ground forces were walking through cities. Nadia watched them from the tree line outside a small town near Valence. They were tall, six-limbed, with hard shells covering their bodies like living armor. They moved in perfect formation, every step synchronized, every turn precise. They did not run. They did not shout. They walked through the burning streets as if they were walking through a garden. They did not shoot anyone. They did not arrest anyone. They did not even look at the humans scrambling out of their way. A woman carrying a baby fell in the street directly in front of a Dravani column, and the soldiers simply stepped around her without breaking stride. Not out of kindness, out of indifference. She was not a threat. She was not even an obstacle. She was nothing. That was the part that made Nadia's stomach turn. She had seen war before. She had served in 3 conflict zones before she turned 30, and she had seen cruelty, rage, and hatred up close. But she had never seen anything like this. The Dravani did not hate humanity. They did not fear humanity. They simply did not think about humanity at all. The United Earth Council sent its final broadcast from a bunker beneath Geneva. The message was short: survive by any means. Then that signal died too. Nadia gathered what was left of her unit. 12 people. 3 of them were wounded. One was a 19-year-old private who had not stopped shaking since the sky changed color. They had 2 rifles, a medical kit, and a radio that could only receive, not send. They moved south through the countryside, staying off the roads, sleeping in barns and ditches. The Dravani patrols passed them several times but never stopped. The aliens had sensors that could detect a heartbeat from 200 meters away, but they were not looking for heartbeats. They were looking for weapons systems, communication arrays, power signatures. Humans hiding in a ditch did not register as anything worth noticing done on the 3rd night. Nadia climbed a church bell tower with a radio and spent 4 hours scanning frequencies. Most were dead. A few carried automated emergency loops that no one was monitoring anymore. But on one frequency, she caught something different. It was a Dravani signal, and the radio's basic translation software. Standard military issue, designed for Allied forces but apparently functional enough for alien syntax, gave her fragments of meaning. The Dravani were filing reports. Detailed, methodical reports. But they were not reporting battles or casualties or resistance. The reports were labeled under a single category that the translator rendered as environmental cleanup progress. Nadia read the phrase 3 times. They were not conquering Earth. They were cleaning it, preparing it. The humans running through the streets, the soldiers firing useless weapons, the governments sending desperate broadcasts. None of it was being recorded as conflict. It was being filed as clutter. Debris to be swept aside before the real work began. She climbed down from the tower and sat in the dark church for a long time. The 19-year-old private, a boy named Remy, asked her what she had found. Nadia looked at him. He was scared and tired and too young for any of this. They all were. They do not think we are enemies, she said quietly. They do not think we are anything. Remy stared at her. So what do we do? Nadia looked out through the broken church doors at the dark countryside, where somewhere in the distance, Dravani machines were already beginning to reshape the air itself. "We changed their minds," she said. 3 weeks after the sky turned dark, a retired schoolteacher named Alain Deschamps stood in a wine cellar beneath Lyon and drew a map of the city's old storm drains on the back of a restaurant menu. He had never held a weapon in his life. He had spent 40 years teaching children how to read and how to think. Now he was teaching 200 frightened civilians how to disappear. Nadia found him by accident. Her group had been moving north, following the river, when they stumbled into one of Alain's supply runners, a teenage girl carrying canned food through a drainage pipe. The girl led them underground, through tunnels that smelled of old stone and damp earth, into a network of cellars that stretched beneath half the city. Alain greeted Nadia with a handshake and a bowl of soup. He was a short man with gray hair and calm eyes, and he spoke the way teachers speak, clearly, patiently, as if every word mattered. He had organized everything: food distribution, sleeping rotations, medical supplies, even a small school for the children. All of it hidden beneath a city that the Dravani were slowly taking apart above their heads. "They are changing the air," Alain told Nadia that first night, sitting across from her at a wooden table lit by a single candle. "My people above have measured it. The oxygen is dropping. Something else is replacing it. Something they can breathe, but we cannot." Nadia had suspected this. The atmosphere processors, massive, humming towers the Dravani had placed in open fields and city squares, were not weapons. They were tools, terraforming tools. The Dravani were not just conquering Earth. They were remaking it into a world where humans could not survive. "How long?" Nadia asked. "For months. Maybe less." They argued that night, and the next night, and the night after that. Alain wanted to stay hidden, build the underground network, stockpile air filters, wait for the Dravani to leave or for some miracle to arrive. Nadia wanted to fight. She did not know how, but she knew that hiding underground while the air above slowly turned to poison was just a slower way of dying. The argument ended on the fourth day, when a Dravani patrol found a group of children a woman named Colette had been running a shelter in an old school basement near the river. 14 children, ages 5 to 12. The Dravani detected the heat signatures and surrounded the building. Nadia expected the worst. She expected violence, cruelty, the things she had seen humans do to each other in war zones. Instead, the Dravani simply sealed the building. They sprayed a thick, hardening foam over every door and window, completely enclosing the structure. Then they walked away. The children were still inside. The air inside would last maybe 8 hours. They did not kill the children. They stored them, like leftovers being put in a container. Nadia did not wait for permission. She took 6 people and went. They reached the school in 20 minutes. The foam was hard as concrete, but it was brittle at the edges, and they hacked through it with axes and crowbars while Colette talked to the children through the wall, telling them to stay calm, telling them it would be okay. They got them out. All 14. But during the rescue, a Dravani patrol appeared at the end of the street. Nadia threw a smoke grenade. It was the only one she had. The gray cloud billowed across the street, thick and formless, and the Dravani soldiers stopped. Not retreated, not fired. Stopped. They stood perfectly still for nearly 3 full seconds, their heads twitching slightly, as if they were listening to something Nadia could not hear. Then Alain's people, watching from the rooftops, started making noise, banging pots, shouting, throwing bottles. The sound came from every direction at once, echoing off the old stone buildings, impossible to locate. The Dravani twitched again. Their movements became jerky, uncertain. One of them actually took a step backward. Nadia stared. She had fought enemies who were stronger, faster, better armed. But she had never seen an enemy become confused by a smoke cloud and some loud noises. She got the children underground and sat in the dark cellar, thinking. The Dravani armor could stop bullets. Their sensors could track a heartbeat through a wall. Their weapons could disable anything with a power source. But when the world around them became messy and unpredictable, they froze. Their technology tried to process everything at once and choked on the input, They were not prepared for chaos. Because wherever they had come from, whatever species they had conquered before, chaos was not something any of those species used. Every civilization the Dravani had faced had fought with order, organized armies, structured defenses, logical strategies. And the Dravani systems were built to defeat order. But humans were not orderly creatures. Humans were messy, loud, emotional, and completely unpredictable. And maybe Nadia thought that was not a weakness. She found Alan sitting with the rescued children, reading them a story by candlelight. She sat down next to him and waited until he finished. "I know how we fight them," she said. Alan looked at her. "With what?" "With everything they cannot calculate." Nadia called it the noise doctrine, and she wrote it on the wall of a wine cellar with a piece of chalk. The rules were simple. Never attack the same way twice. Never be where the enemy expects. Never be quiet. Make every fight feel like the end of the world, even if you only have rocks and tin cans. She trained teams in the tunnels beneath Lion. 15 groups of 10. Each group had a different job. Some were fighters. Some were runners. Some were just noise. Their entire purpose was to scream, bang, flash lights, and create as much confusion as possible in the shortest amount of time. Nadia called them the orchestra. Alan thought she was insane. He told her so every morning over breakfast. "You're asking people to run at alien soldiers carrying pots and pans," he said. "I'm asking people to survive," she said. "And right now, hiding is not surviving. It is just waiting to suffocate." He could not argue with that. The first real test came 6 weeks after the invasion. A Dravani supply convoy moved through the outskirts of Grenoble. 4 transports carrying equipment for a new atmosphere processor. If that processor went online, the timeline for breathable air would drop by another 3 weeks. Nadia positioned her teams before dawn. Fighters in the storm drains. Runners on the rooftops. The orchestra spread across the surrounding hills with everything they could find. Car horns, drums made from barrels, sheets of metal to bang together, mirrors to catch the morning light and throw it in every direction. A group of children flew kites made from emergency blankets, filling the sky with flashing, twisting shapes. At exactly 7 in the morning, Nadia gave the signal. The hills exploded with noise. Not gunfire, not explosions, just sound, raw, chaotic, layered, coming from everywhere at once. Drums pounding different rhythms. Horns blasting. Voices screaming and singing and laughing. The mirrors caught the sun and scattered light across the convoy like 1,000 tiny fires. The Dravani column stopped. Their soldiers turned, sensors sweeping, trying to lock onto targets. But there were no targets. There were just sounds and lights and movement, none of it matching any known attack pattern. The living armor on the Dravani bodies flickered and shifted, trying to adapt to threats that were not threats. Then Nadia's fighters hit them from below. They came up from the drains, fast and low, and they did not shoot. They threw buckets of paint on the Dravani visors, blinding them. They wrapped chains around their legs. They shoved burning rags into the gaps of their armor. One fighter, a baker named Olivier who weighed 120 kilograms, simply tackled a Dravani soldier to the ground and sat on it. 7 Dravani fell. One transport was disabled. The entire engagement lasted less than 4 minutes before Nadia called the retreat, and her people vanished back into the drains and the hills like water, soaking into the ground. It was a tiny victory. 7 soldiers out of an army of millions. One transport out of thousands. But when Nadia intercepted the Dravani after-action report that evening, she laughed for the first time since the invasion began. The report did not classify the engagement as a battle. It did not list casualties or tactical failures. The Dravani War Intelligence filed the entire event under a single category: sensor malfunction, cause unknown. They could not even recognize that they had been fought. The word spread. Nadia did not spread it. It spread itself. The way fire spreads, the way songs spread, the way hope spreads when people have nothing else to hold on to. Underground radio carried the story. Runners carried handwritten copies of the noise doctrine from cell to cell, city to city, country to country, and every culture that received it made it their OWI in Brazil. A resistance cell in Sao Paulo used samba drums and homemade fireworks to ambush a Dravani checkpoint. The aliens stood frozen while dancers in bright costumes ran circles around them, and fighters crawled under their transports and cut fuel lines that in Osaka. A cell organized a fake festival. They built floats from wreckage and paraded them through the streets, pounding taiko drums so hard the ground shook. The Dravani sensors registered the vibrations as seismic activity and diverted 3 patrols to investigate, leaving a processor station unguarded long enough for a sabotage team to damage its intake valves that in Lagos. A cell turned an entire market into a weapon. Hundreds of vendors shouted and threw goods into the air, while a team of mechanics dismantled a Dravani communications relay with hand tools in broad daylight. Every victory was small. Every victory was messy, loud, and completely ridiculous. And every victory was something the Dravani could not understand, could not predict, and could not stop, because the Dravani had conquered 40 species. They had defeated armies with better ships, stronger shields, and smarter strategies. But they had never faced a species that turned a war into a carnival. They had never faced creatures who would fight with music and paint and kites and cooking pots and sheer, stubborn, beautiful madness. Nadia stood in the cellar beneath Lion, reading reports from cells she had never met, in countries she had never visited, fighting with methods she had never imagined. And she understood something that the Dravani, for all their technology, could not. Humans did not need a plan to be dangerous. They just needed a reason, and the Dravani had given them the best reason in the world. They had told humanity it did not matter. Nothing makes a human more dangerous than being told they do not count. The Dravani learned. That was the terrible thing about them. They were slow to adapt, but they were not stupid, and when the reports from Earth stopped reading as sensor malfunctions and started reading as something else entirely, the collective sent its answer. They were called the Silent. Nadia never learned whether that was their real name or a translation, but it did not matter. What mattered was what they could do. The Silent were Dravani elite soldiers rebuilt from the ground up for high-interference combat. Their armor did not just absorb noise, it erased it. They moved through smoke and light and sound as if walking through clear air. Their sensors did not try to process chaos. They filtered it out completely, identifying real threats beneath the static the way a hawk spots a mouse in a field of tall grass. The Silent arrived on a Tuesday. By Thursday, 3 resistance cells were gone. The first was in Marseille. The cell tried a classic noise doctrine ambush. Drums, lights, smoke, fighters from below. The Silent walked through it all without slowing down. They identified every fighter in under 4 seconds and neutralized them with precise bursts of directed energy. No wasted shots. No confusion. No hesitation. The second was near Stuttgart. The third was in the hills outside Florence. Same result each time. The chaos washed over the Silent like water over stone, and they killed with the calm efficiency of machines clearing a field. The underground radio went quiet. Not because the transmitter stopped working, but because no one knew what to say. Nadia lost people she cared about. Olivier, the baker who had tackled a Dravani soldier in Grenoble, was killed in a failed ambush near Avignon. A runner named Salima, who was 22 years old and had memorized every tunnel beneath Lion, was captured and never seen again. Remy, the young private who had been with Nadia since the first day, took a piece of shrapnel to the shoulder and could no longer hold a weapon. And then they took a land that he was above ground coordinating a supply run when a silent patrol found him. They did not kill him. They put him in a containment field, a shimmering column of energy that held him suspended in the air like an insect in glass, and placed him in the central square of Lion where everyone could see him. A warning, a message. This is what happens. Nadia stood in the dark beneath the city and felt something she had not felt since the invasion began. Not fear. She had lived with fear for months. This was something heavier. This was the feeling that she had been wrong. That the noise doctrine was a trick that had worked once and would never work again. That the Dravani had simply let them play for a while before swatting them down. She sat alone for a long time. and she made herself think. The silent filtered noise by finding patterns in it. They could ignore chaos because, after enough exposure, chaos itself became predictable. The drums, the lights, the screaming, it was all different in detail, but the same in structure. Sensory overload from multiple directions followed by a ground-level attack. The formula varied, but it was still a formula, and the Silent had learned so the answer was to stop having a formula. Nadia spent 2 days rebuilding the resistance from the ground up. She broke every cell into smaller pieces. No central command, no shared tactics, no communication between groups unless absolutely necessary. Each fragment would operate alone, inventing its own methods, using whatever it had, attacking or not attacking based on its own judgment point. One cell in Lion released beehives into a Dravani checkpoint. Another flooded a tunnel network and funneled the water into a processor station's cooling system. A cell in Bordeaux trained stray dogs to carry small speakers playing random sounds and sent them running through patrol routes. A cell in Mumbai rigged an entire neighborhood's water pipes to spray bright red dye at timed intervals, painting the streets and everything on them the color of blood. None of these methods were taught. None of them were planned by Nadia. They simply happened because humans, given a problem and no instructions, will invent 100 different solutions, and not one of them will look like any of the others. The Silent began to struggle. Not because any single tactic defeated them. No single tactic did. But their filtering systems worked by learning patterns, and when no pattern existed, there was nothing to filter. Every engagement was entirely new. Every cell was a completely different kind of problem. The Silent could adapt to anything, but they could not adapt to everything at once. And while the Dravani elite chased 1,000 small fires across the planet, Nadia planned something much bigger. She planned to get a land back. She did not plan a military rescue. She planned a party that on a warm evening in late summer, every surviving human in Lion came above ground. Hundreds of them. They poured into the streets around the central square, carrying torches and instruments, and painted banners and food and wine. They danced. They sang. They lit bonfires. They filled the city with so much light and noise and life that the Dravani sensors in the area overloaded trying to track it all. And while the city burned with celebration, a 4-person team walked calmly into the square, disabled the containment field with a voltage spike from a car battery, and caught Alan as he fell. He was thin and bruised and had not slept in days. But when Nadia reached him, carrying him through the crowd while the city roared around them, the old teacher was laughing. "You are all completely insane," he said. "Yes," Nadia said. "That is the entire point." The message arrived through 7 different relay points, bounced across 3 continents, and was hand-delivered to Nadia on a folded piece of paper by a 12-year-old girl who had walked 9 kilometers through a drainage tunnel to bring it. The message was 4 words long. "I wish to speak." It was signed with a Dravani command glyph. A field commander, one of the highest-ranking aliens on the planet, was asking for a conversation. Alan told her not to go. Remy, his arms still in a sling, told her it was a trap. Colette, who had not stopped fighting since the day her children were sealed in that school, simply handed Nadia a knife and said nothing. Nadia went. They met in the ruins of a cathedral in the old part of Lion. The roof was gone, blown away in the first wave of the invasion, and the evening sky was visible above the broken stone walls. Nadia came alone. The Dravani commander came alone too, though Nadia suspected there were silent units somewhere in the shadows. The commander was called Shurat. It was enormous, even by Dravani standards. Nearly 3 meters tall, with 6 limbs folded beneath a carapace that was covered in scars and discoloration. It had fought in human engagements. The marks showed it. A splash of blue paint from a Bordeaux ambush. A burn line from a Sao Paulo firework. A long scratch down one side that could only have come from something sharp and desperate, swung by a human hand that IT spoke through a small device attached to its chest. The voice that came out was flat, mechanical, and careful. "I have conquered 11 species," Shurat said. "On 6 worlds. Each one resisted. Each one was defeated in a standard cycle. Your species should have been defeated in less than a standard cycle." Nadia said nothing. She stood with her hands at her sides and waited. Your weapons are inferior. Your bodies are fragile. Your communication systems are primitive. Your political structures collapsed within hours. By every measure the collective uses, your species is among the weakest we have encountered. And yet, Nadia said that Shurat's head tilted. A slow, mechanical movement. And yet, it repeated. You are the first species to damage our supply lines. The first to disable our processors. The first to force deployment of the Silent on a planetary scale. And you did this with paint, fire, sound, and animals. You forgot the cooking pots. Nadia said. Shurat did not react to the joke. Perhaps it did not understand it. Perhaps it did not care. My war intelligence cannot model your resistance, Shurat continued. It has attempted to do so 412 times. Each model fails. Your actions contain no strategic logic. Your attacks serve no measurable tactical purpose. Your methods change with every encounter and follow no detectable doctrine. My intelligence classifies your resistance as non-information, signals that carry no data. Nadia felt something shift in her chest. Not pride, something quieter, something like recognition. I have a question, Shurat said. What is it? What is what? The thing you fight with. It is not technology. It is not strategy. It is not strength. Every species fights with these things, and we defeat them. You fight with something else. Something my systems cannot identify. What is it? Nadia thought for a long time. The evening light fell through the broken cathedral roof and painted shadows on the old stone floor. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the hum of an atmospheric processor slowly poisoning her world. It is what happens, she said finally, when you tell a person they do not matter and they disagree. Shurat was still for a long moment. Then it said something that Nadia did not expect. The atmospheric conversion is accelerating. Your air will become unbreathable in 23 days. Not 4 months. 23 days. Nadia's stomach dropped. 23 days. That was nothing. That was not enough time to fight, to plan, to do anything. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because the invasion of your world was ordered by the war caste of the collective. The science caste and the builder caste opposed it. They argued that your system was too remote, too resource poor, and too biologically incompatible to justify the cost. The war caste overruled them. It does this often. It has the authority because it always succeeds. Shurat leaned forward, and for the first time, Nadia saw something in its posture that she recognized. She had seen it in soldiers before, in people who had followed orders they did not believe in, for leaders they did not trust. If the war caste fails, Shurat said, visibly and undeniably, the other caste will withdraw their support. The invasion will be recalled. Not because your species won, because the cost of continuing will exceed the war caste's authority to justify it. Nadia stared at the alien. You want us to embarrass them. I'm telling you what would happen if the war caste's record of total success were broken. What you do with this information is not my concern. Shurat stood. It turned toward the cathedral door, then paused. One more thing, it said. The other species we conquered, they all asked us to stop. They sent diplomats. They offered surrender. They begged. Your species has not sent a single message to the collective. Not one request. Not one plea. In our records, your species has said nothing to us at all. That is because we have nothing to say to you, Nadia said. Shurat left. Nadia stood alone in the ruined cathedral, looking up at the sky through the broken roof. 23 days. No army. No weapons. No technology, but she had something better. She had every stubborn, loud, creative, impossible human being left on the planet. And she had an idea. It took 11 days to spread the word. 11 days of runners in tunnels, whispered messages on broken radios, hand-drawn instructions passed from person to person across 6 continents. Nadia's plan was the simplest thing she had ever created and the hardest thing she had ever asked anyone to do. She asked every human on Earth to be silent. The message was identical everywhere it arrived. At exactly noon, Greenwich time, on the 21st day after Shurat's warning, every person still alive would stop. No noise, no movement, no archat masking drums, no mirror signals, No chaos. Just stillness. Complete, total, and absolute stillness. For exactly 60 seconds. And then, at second 61, they would scream. Alan read the plan and set it down carefully on the table. You want to play dead, he said. I want to play dead, Nadia agreed. And then I want to come back to life so loud that their systems never recover. This is the most insane thing you have ever proposed. I know. It might actually work. I know that too. The final 10 days were the busiest in the history of the Resistance. While the message spread, sabotage teams moved into position near every atmospheric processor on the planet. They could not attack the processors while they were guarded. But if the Dravani systems went down, even for a few minutes, the guards would lose coordination. And a few minutes was all the teams needed. The morning of the 21st day was overcast. Nadia stood in the ruins of the cathedral where she had met Shurat, surrounded by her people. Alan was beside her. Remy was there, his arm finally out of its sling. Colette was there with her children. Olivier's wife was there, holding a photograph of her husband and a wrench she intended to use on the nearest processor. At T1159, the world was still fighting. Cells in Buenos Aires were harassing a patrol. A group in Cairo was dismantling a sensor array. A team in Vancouver was flooding a tunnel beneath a Dravani base. The usual beautiful, chaotic, impossible human noise. T12 hours, it all stopped. Every drum fell silent. Every voice went quiet. Every runner stopped running. Every fighter put down their weapon and stood still. Across the entire planet, in every city and forest and tunnel and mountain, billions of human beings held their breath at the same time. The silence was enormous. It pressed against the walls of the world like deep water. The wind blew through empty streets. Birds sang over quiet fields. And the Dravani sensor arrays, which had spent months calibrating themselves to filter the endless noise of human resistance, suddenly had nothing to filter. Their systems searched for life signs. Heartbeats, body heat, electrical activity, movement, sound. And they found nothing. The humans had not disappeared, of course. They were standing right there. But they were so still, so quiet, so perfectly synchronized in their silence that the sensors read them as background, as stone, as earth. For 60 seconds, every Dravani soldier, every war intelligence node, every command system on the planet registered the same reading. No life signs detected. Species status: extinct. Shurat, aboard its command vessel in orbit, watched the data cascade across its displays. A world that had been burning with resistance for months had simply gone dark. The war intelligence began recalculating. Had the atmospheric conversion succeeded early? Had some unknown weapon been deployed? The system churned through possibilities, trying to explain how a species of billions could vanish in a single heartbeat. T12 hours, 1 minute, and 1 second. Every human on Earth opened their mouth and screamed that IT was not a battle cry. It was not a coordinated signal. It was just a scream, the rawest, most human sound there is. A sound that means I am here. A sound that means I refuse. A sound that means I am alive, and you cannot change that. Billions of voices all at once, filling every valley and street and ocean and sky. The Dravani war intelligence, which had spent 60 seconds processing the impossibility of human extinction, now had to process the impossibility of human resurrection. A species that was dead was alive. A signal that read 0 now read maximum. The data contradicted itself at every level, and the system, designed to be logical, sequential, orderly, could not reconcile IT crashed. Not a gradual failure. A total, system-wide collapse. Every linked node, every sensor array, every coordination network on the planet went dark at the same moment. The Dravani soldiers, who had relied on their systems for every decision since the day they were born, stood paralyzed. Their armor dimmed, their weapons powered down. Their formations broke apart as each soldier, for the first time in its life, had to think without being told what to think. And in that window, the sabotage teams moved. Atmospheric processors across the world were breached, dismantled, and destroyed. Some teams used explosives. Some used hand tools. One team in Kenya simply drove a truck into a processor at full speed. The terraforming stopped. Within 6 hours, the Dravani Science Cast and Builder Cast formally withdrew their support for the invasion. The War Cast, its record of total victory broken for the first time in collective history, had no authority to continue. The retreat began before sunset. Shurat sent one final message to Nadia. It arrived on the same frequency where, months ago, she had first intercepted reports about environmental cleanup. "You fought with nothing we could measure," the message read. "What do you call this weapon?" Nadia stood in the open air of a free lion, surrounded by people who were crying and laughing and holding each other, and she typed a response on a battered military radio with hands that would not stop shaking. "We call it Spirit, and you cannot take it from us. Not from anyone. Not ever." The Dravani fleet left Earth orbit that night. In their star charts, they marked the small blue planet with a new classification. Not conquered, not hostile, not primitive, simply alive.